Welcome, everyone, to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion. I'm Shelley Emling, the editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. And this month, the more than 90,000 members of the Girlfriend Book Club chose All the Colors of the Dark as our November book club pick. And as always, I say this every single month, but you guys chose so well. I was a little bit daunted by the length of this book, but once I started reading it, I could not put it down. So thank you guys for choosing this New York Times bestseller. It's amazing. And we're so pleased that tonight we're welcoming Chris Whitaker, the author. And welcome, Chris.
Hi Shelley. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for choosing my book.
Yes, it's amazing. So for maybe the handful of people out there who have not read this book, just can you tell us the gist of it without giving away the ending?
I can. Okay, so the story, All the Colors of the Dark, follows two abducted teenagers who fall in love in the pitch black basement they're being held in, having never met each other. The boy escapes and then can't find his way back to the girl. The police don't believe that she's real. They think that he made her up because of the trauma of being held for so long, but he knows in his heart that she is. So that kind of sets forth a 26-year hunt for this missing girl who may or may not be real, and he's joined by his best friend, who is obsessed as he is.
So I think I read that the impetus for this book was that idea of two teenagers stuck in the dark together, abducted. I mean, where did you come up with that idea? How did that come to you?
I had a really strong idea for the characters. So I had Patch, this boy born with one eye, very much an outsider, tries to make friends and can't. The same can be said of Saint. You know, she is a girl that doesn't really fit in. She doesn't have many friends, and so when they find each other, they really cling to each other. And I wanted to have a look at loss, you know, and what happens when you're a child and you go through something traumatic, and how you can kind of feel like the rest of your life is dictated, like you don't have a say in what's going to happen. And Patch is very much like that, and Saint kind of is slightly more controlled. But it was looking at her as well, because although she's not directly affected, she is on the peripheral of what happens, and her life is completely altered too. So it was a look at sliding doors moments, you know, the moments in our lives when everything completely changes, and then the struggle to find your way again.
I love that movie, Sliding Doors, by the way. Um, was Patch based on anybody that you know, or it's just a figment of your imagination?
It was a figment of my imagination, but I had a difficult childhood when I was a kid, and so writing a lot of the Patch scenes felt really personal. You know, I felt like I was going on this journey with him, and I was trying to kind of, I asked the question, you know, if you're a child and you've had a difficult start in life, are you still able to dictate the rest of your life and kind of write the end to your own story? And I was answering that question as much for Patch as I was for myself when I was writing. So it was a very personal journey.
Well, I'm going to skip ahead because I did read some previous interviews with you, and I know you've said that writing this book forced you to look back at the difficult events that shaped your own life, and see that sometimes against the longest of odds, something special can come from something bad. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I had a really strange journey into writing, and I left school without any qualifications, and I was kind of lost slightly. You know, my friends knew what they wanted to do with their lives, and I just had no idea. And I was out one morning working and dropping leaflets through people's doors, and someone mugged me for my phone. And but it was really violent because I put up a fight, and I ended up being stabbed 3 times in the side, and I had a really difficult time afterwards with PTSD, and I didn't really know what PTSD was at that time. I just knew that I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I couldn't read a book, couldn't watch TV, couldn't really do anything. It felt just like slightly like I was unraveling. You know,
How
like
old were you when this happened? How
I
old
was
were you?
19. I was
19.
19 at the time, and I remember everyone afterwards kept telling me that I was lucky, you know, because I could have been killed, but
Mm.
I remember feeling really unlucky. You know, I remember feeling like I was just kind of I was trying to go about my day, and my path crossed with this person. You know, it felt like a sliding doors moment.
Yeah.
You know, one minute I was doing my job, the next I was bleeding on the street, and my life was completely altered after that, because I had this PTSD, and I did a writing therapy where you take the traumatic incident and you write about it, but you change the people involved to fictional characters. And it was the first time I had written anything since school, because I had no desire to be a writer. I was a big reader
Oh,
since I was a kid,
mm,
but writing didn't feel like it was an option for someone with my background, with no real education. So it wasn't something I considered until a long time after that incident. So it was certainly an incident that began my journey towards becoming an author.
yeah.
But I think the point of All the Colours of the Dark, and the point, and the answer to your question is Patch. Patch is probably a kid that would never pick up a paintbrush,
Right.
and had this terrible thing not happen to him. It's not a spoiler to say he discovers he's a gifted artist, and it
Right.
completely changes his life. You know, in the same way that I'm someone that wouldn't have tried to write a book had I not been stabbed. Had this terrible thing not happened to me, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you about, you
Mm.
know, a book that's completely changed my life, had it not come from the trauma.
So I know you've written other books. Is this the most personal to you? It sounds like Patch is quite a bit drawn on
I
your own
think so.
life
It's
experience.
funny, he is, but I didn't really realize it until I was about halfway through writing it. So I was writing the scenes when Patch is held in the basement, and I found them so difficult to write that I would constantly stop and break, and I didn't really realize why. And I was thinking back at my own life, and I was thinking about all the things that had happened to me, both good and bad,
Mhm.
and I kind of tracked them all the way back to being a 10-year-old, and my parents had divorced, and a violent person came into my life, a man, and I was asleep one night, and he pulled me out of bed by my arm, and my arm broke, and he kind of panicked because he didn't want to get in trouble, and so he sent me back to my bedroom and told me to stay there until the morning, and then to tell my parents that I'd done it playing football. So I was sent back to my room, and I wasn't allowed to make any noise, and I kind of had this night that wasn't entirely dissimilar to some of the things that Patch goes through, because I was in a lot of pain, but I couldn't make any noise. And I just remember it feeling like time had stopped. You know, as a 10-year-old, it felt
Yeah.
like the longest night of my life. And then the next morning I woke up and told my parents I'd done it playing football, and that was a lie that I stuck to until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when I told my dad what had happened for the first time. But so writing Patch, I didn't realize until I was writing those scenes, felt, you know, very close to home.
So you had that happen, then the stabbing at 19. You've had a lot of bad things happen, but then a lot of good things too, I know from what I've read.
Yeah, I have. I think it's been I don't know, I feel like I was kind of, I don't like the word normal, but I felt like I was a normal kid for the first 10 years of my life, and then I felt like this terrible thing happened to me and my life kind of veered off. Like my
Right.
brother went to university, got a job. I went a completely different way, you know,
Yeah.
messed up everything and spent like decades trying to find my way back, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you know, I never ever would have guessed that I would have written a book. It just, you know, as much as I'm a big reader, it felt so far beyond like my skills, or something
Right.
that I thought that I would be able to do. But I also know that I wouldn't have been able to do it had I not had these experiences. Like,
Mhm.
there's no way I could have written a character like Patch, a character like
Right.
Sane, had I not lived something fairly similar, or at least experienced some of the trauma that I'm able to write about through them.
Was it a little bit sad when it was all over and you wrote the last paragraph and you let
Oh
these
God,
characters go?
it was so bad. It was like I really, really didn't want to like I could have spent another few years writing this book happily. Like
Yeah.
I could have just gone on and on and on and carried on tweaking it and writing more of their story, because they felt so real to me. You know, it felt like living with people for 4 years, you know, like family members that
Right.
you know as intimately as you know yourself. You know, I know everything about those characters. They feel so
Yeah.
real to me. So then letting them go, on the one hand, it's really frightening because, you know, they're not in your life anymore. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, they're suddenly in the lives of, you know, hundreds of thousands
Everybody.
of people that are going to have an opinion on them, and because it felt so personal, it's almost like their opinion on them, and Patch is their opinion on me.
Right.
And I never get nervous for anything, but this book was the only time I've ever
Yeah.
felt nervous, because it felt like, firstly, I couldn't do any better. It
Mm.
felt like categorically this is at the moment, this is the best book that I can possibly write.
How long did it
So
take you to write this book?
it took 4 years from
For
start
you.
to finish. I think it probably should have taken 2 years, but
Yeah.
it turned into such a big book. It started like the book I pitched you just now sounds a bit like a mystery,
Yeah.
but it evolved into this big, sprawling, epic story. It's a coming of age story. It's a look at
Right.
first love and family and the changing meaning of family as you get older. It's
Yeah.
look at beekeeping and
Yeah.
pirates.
Yeah.
There were just so many topics in it, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was tough.
Well, I always ask authors, was there a particular character or scene or chapter or section that was the most challenging to write for you?
So without doubt, it was the basement scenes with
Yeah.
Patch, because I knew they were coming, and I don't write in the correct order. Like, I spent the first year writing dialogue. Year two, I spent writing bits of story, but in the wrong order, kind of like how they film TV. So I was putting this off because I knew I was going to have to write the abduction scenes. I knew it was
Right.
going to be a very small part of the book, and it wouldn't be gratuitous. It wouldn't, you wouldn't see much, but I also knew it was going to really take a toll because I loved Patch. I loved the character. I didn't
Yeah.
want to write him in such a difficult position. So I kept putting it off and putting it off. And then eventually, when I did start writing it, I found it so hard that I would spend a day writing the Patch scenes, and then I'd switch and I'd write
Yeah.
something like them getting ready to go to prom, or I'd write Sammy or another
Right.
something lighter. Then I'd go back to the basement. So I think it just it really took a toll putting a 13-year-old in such a difficult
Yeah.
position.
So I know you are from the UK. You live in the UK. I
Mhm.
know your another book you wrote, "We Begin at the End," was also set in the America. This book,
Mhm.
of course, is set in America. I mean, what kind of research do you do for something like this? Do you have American friends that you run the chapters by to see if it makes sense,
I
or
wish I did. I wish I had some American friends. That would have made my life easier. No, I was working in the library. I worked in the city for a while, for 10 years, and then quit my job because I wanted to write a book. And which was kind of a crazy decision financially, because, I had to sell my house and sell my car and completely,
wow,
changed my life, and took a real risk, and felt really guilty afterwards for years because my kids were small, and all of a sudden we had no money, and
yeah,
I had to go out and get extra jobs because being a writer doesn't pay very much.
yeah,
So I was one of my many jobs that I had. I was working in the library, which I loved, and so I had access to all of the library resources. So I would sit down with maps and history books and non-fiction and travel guides and begin piecing together the geography of the story, and then the actual writing of it. I write across 3 screens. So
mm,
the middle screen will have the manuscript on it, and the
yeah.
left hand screen will have what I can see. So if we're looking at Saint in the Woods in Missouri, I will have pictures of the woods in 1975 in Missouri on the left
Oh,
screen.
wow,
And on the right hand screen, I will have everything she can see and hear and feel. So it will be what type of birds are singing, what type of year it is, so we know how many leaves have fallen off the tree, and what type of tree it is. And so every single detail will be meticulously plotted out. And then I'll begin writing the scene,
yeah,
and hope that, I get enough detail right, that it makes you feel like you're with her, that
right.
you should feel like you're taking the walk with Saint, that you're standing right over her shoulder and watching and feeling everything that she does.
That's incredible. I know you did a US, I think you did a US book tour over the summer. Is that right? Or
I've just finished. So I've just finished the fourth US tour. I've just landed today from Chicago, so I
oh
came
wow,
back yesterday. Yeah, so that was number four, but that's been incredible. Finally seeing some of the places that I've written about
well, I was going
in
to
the
ask you. I mean,
flesh.
do you visit those places? I mean, what was the? I mean, this book has gotten such a huge reaction. It must have been thrilling for you to
Yes.
meet your American fans. You know?
Oh, it's been so, because We Begin at the End was the last one, but that came out during lockdown,
Yeah.
so I couldn't do any of the touring. I couldn't meet anyone. I did a lot of Zoom meetings, but I couldn't
Mhm.
meet anyone in the flesh. So getting to do it properly and to do 4 tours, and I'm coming back again in January, so it'll be number five.
Oh wow,
It's yeah, and it's really really special and really lovely. And I think the thing that has struck me most is how kind everyone has been,
well,
because
that's really
I
nice to
think,
hear.
yeah, I get to. It's just, I don't know if it's an American thing, but there's a warmth and an openness and an acceptance and a kind of kindness, because I'm a British person writing about places that I've never been to. So there's an element of,
Yeah.
is he going to get it right? What mistakes is he going to make? But everyone has just been completely and utterly welcoming and kind to me. So that is lovely.
So what's your writing routine been like during these couple 4 years of writing this book? Do you get up at 9 and write till 5, or do you kind
No,
of wing it? Not much?
annoyingly. So because of what happened to me when I was a kid, I'm a terrible sleeper. I've
Oh,
had a lifetime of sleep problems. I think
right.
subconsciously when I lie down, I don't feel safe. I feel like
Yeah,
something bad's going to happen to me, so it stops me sleeping. So I'm awake a lot in the night, and I have 3 kids as well, and the house is quiet at night because the kids are asleep.
yeah,
So I tend to do a lot of writing during the night hours, and then first thing in the morning, and then I spend the afternoons doing interviews and PR and things like that, because I
right.
find that's the time when I'm least creative, is the afternoon, the kind of lull. And then I like to pick the kids up from school and make their dinner, and
Yeah.
yeah, so
Did
I'm a
did your
night owl.
yeah. Did your parents read this? And, I mean, did you
Yeah,
show it to
they
them
did.
before it was published, or they
They read very early copies before. I say early, it was pretty much a finished book when they read it. But my dad is I think probably my biggest reader, and he collects the foreign editions of all the books, and there's a lot of them. So
So, I mean, the book club members wanted to know how you got into writing, but it sounds like you didn't intend to get into into
I
being
didn't. So I
writing.
did. I did the writing as therapy, and then I stopped because I just used it for survival and nothing else. I didn't want to write a book at that point. And then I turned. I was around 20 years old, and I picked up a newspaper and I read an article about a stockbroker, and there was a picture of this guy with a Ferrari, and so I thought, obviously, as a 20-year-old, I want to be a stockbroker. I want a Ferrari. And it doesn't matter that I was terrible at maths, and did not do well at school. So I went into the city, and I got thrown out of loads of different banks, and then I eventually, one of them took pity on me, and I spent my first few years as a doing kind of client entertaining. I was a junior broker, so people would come over and I would take them out drinking and things like that, and
Yeah,
it was fun. But I really wanted to be a trader, and traders sit on the trading desk, and they're kind of at the sharp end of the business. But my boss said I kind of had a limit of $10,000. If I lost $10,000, I had to stop trading. And
right.
on my first day in the morning, I lost $2 million straight away. And
What? Really?
yeah, and I got myself into loads of trouble, because I think as a kid I had learned, if something bad happens, you don't tell anyone, you deal with it yourself. So I didn't tell anyone, which got me into a world of trouble, because that is illegal. And eventually I got caught, and agreed to pay back half of the money myself. And so I had this huge debt, $1 million debt, when I was 24. But I eventually worked it off and paid it back. And then I was nearly 30, and I thought I had everything I wanted. I had a really good job in the city. I had a nice house, nice car. I
Yeah,
was married, and had 2 kids, and I was really miserable, like really deeply unhappy, and I didn't know why. And I picked up a book called The Last Child by an author called John Hart, which I loved. And I read an interview with John Hart, and he talked about how he was a successful lawyer, and one day he just quit his job because he was miserable, because he wanted to write. And so I looked back over my life and thought, what is the constant? What is the thing that I turn to whenever I'm feeling down, whenever I'm in trouble, when I can't cope? What makes me feel better? And it was writing. So the next day I quit my job after reading that interview, and and kind of plunged my family into financial crisis, and felt really bad about it. But I felt like I needed it. I
yeah,
felt like I really needed to do it. But now, looking back at it, I can't quite believe that I did it, because it could have so easily gone wrong.
yeah.
And
But
it
look how
kind of
great it
did.
turned out.
It did, but not until We Begin at the End. So there were 2 books before that in the UK,
Yeah,
and it's really hard to make money as an author.
right.
So, like, critically, the books did really well, but it wasn't until We Begin at the End that they did well commercially,
Yeah,
and it was life changing. But it's only very recently,
yeah.
maybe like 18 months, 2 years ago, that I became a full time writer.
Wow.
So
I'm
10
so
years
happy
after.
for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like I can't quite believe that I get to tell stories for a living. You know, it's
So a lot of the book club members have said that this would make a great movie. Is there
mhm.
anything in the works that you can share with us?
There is. So Universal have the option, and
What?
they are making a TV series from it. And I've read the
Really?
pilot episode, and it's really good. Yes, and it's going to be a lot of two. I think they're looking at doing 3 seasons from the one book. So
When
yeah.
does that start? Anything? I mean, when?
It's so I've given up trying to guess with TV because sometimes it feels like nothing's happening. Then all of a sudden a script arrives. Then all of a sudden you find out something big's happening. But I know the writer working on it, and she's incredible.
Oh,
So
that's so great.
I am hopeful. Yeah, I'm hopeful we'll get to see Patch and Saint on screen.
So I just have to ask you, these days, I mean, are there authors that inspire you? Is there a book that you've read this year that you just absolutely loved? Is there anything you could recommend
Oh,
to us?
so many actually. I'm on a really really hot streak of reading at the moment. So I know that I'm really late to the party, but I read A Prayer for Owen Meany by
Oh,
John
okay.
Irving. And because everyone kept recommending it to me on
Yeah.
social media, everyone was saying it's one of my favorite books. So I found a copy, and I think it was written in 1987 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's incredible, you know. And I finished it and felt really like bereft, you know, when you want to reach out and talk to the author because you miss the character so much.
Yeah.
I felt like that about Owen. And I love Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I don't know if you've read that one by
Yeah, I have
Gabrielle.
read that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Really
love that. And I've just finished a new book called Notes on Infinity that comes out next year,
good. Oh,
and that is similar to Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It's brilliant. That's a debut, and there's another debut called The Names by Florence Knapp, and that comes out next year, and that's brilliant. That looks at the idea that so we follow a little boy, 3 different versions of his life depending on the name he gets. So he has a
oh,
dad that's quite abusive and wants to give him the family name, his name, and so we follow what happens if he's named with his father's name, and then yeah, it's just brilliant. So
that's
I've
also
been
kind of
reading
a
that.
sliding door scenario, right? And
Exactly,
depending on what
that's
your name
exactly
is,
right. Yeah,
how your life turns out.
yeah. So that was really good. Yeah, good
And are
books.
you? What are you working on next?
I'm
What's
working on
book wise?
a love story called The Timekeeper, and my editor would describe it as the time traveler's wife meets The Fault in Our Stars. And I'm really struggling for time to write though at the moment because I've been touring
Yeah.
since June. I've done the US 4 times, and some of Europe, and then next year I do Australia, New
Oh,
Zealand, US
nice.
again, and then Switzerland, Germany, and just all over the place. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to learn how to stop and then start again, and then because normally I like to clear my schedule and
Yeah.
spend years working on the story, completely lose myself in it. But at the moment, that time is not a luxury that I have in the nicest way.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it won't take you 4 years to to write this.
My publishers are hoping that as well. Actually.
Um, so I always have to ask, what do you do for fun? I guess you've got 3 kids, you don't have any time for I don't know how much time you have, but when you're
I
not writing and reading and taking care of kids, I mean, or do you have other
Yeah.
hobbies? What do you like to do with your friends? That sort of thing.
I like to cook a lot.
Oh, you like
I'm
to cook?
really into cooking. Yeah, so that's what I miss a lot when I'm on tour. And you know, it's really nice eating out, but when you're doing it for 2, 3 weeks at a time, you
Yeah.
really miss a home cooked meal. So I like to cook, and my youngest son is really into sport, so we go and watch Arsenal, the football
Yeah.
team, soccer team,
Yeah.
together, and he's really into baking, and my 4-year-old daughter is into painting my face with makeup and my nails and things like that.
It's funny.
Yeah. So yeah, I spend all of my time with makeup on, cooking, and with my kids.
Just one more question. Getting back to all the colors of the dark, you wrote a lot about the FBI and that sort of, crime and law enforcement. Did that take a
Mhm.
lot of that must have taken a lot of research, right?
It did actually, because it's very different to the UK.
Yeah.
Um, and in the US, you kind of have, because it's so big. It's quite autonomous. Some of the regions, and the
Right.
police have control, and the police chief will be in charge of a certain area. But I don't think I realised quite how big it was until I was flying over it. And
Yeah.
it feels like a whole world within a country.
It
And
does.
it's so different, East Coast to West Coast and
Right.
Midwest, and everything has its own personality. And I've just come back from Charleston, which I
Oh,
loved.
that's
Yeah,
where my
it's so.
mother-in-law lives, in Charleston. It's
Oh,
one of my
really?
favorite cities. Yeah,
It's amazing, isn't
it's
it? Absolutely.
wonderful.
Like the
Yeah,
houses by the water, like the
yeah,
biggest houses I've ever seen. They look like they should be museums.
yeah.
They are amazing. So that felt like the South felt like it had its own charm, you know.
Oh,
So yeah, but endless research into the FBI, and but also without getting too bogged down in details, because I never
yeah,
think of it as a crime book, but
yeah,
story. I think
right.
of it as, a coming of age story with a crime in it.
Yeah,
Like, for example, if I was writing my life story, there is a crime in it. I was a victim of crime, but I wouldn't describe my story as a crime story.
yeah.
So I kept that in mind when I was writing All the Colors of the Dark.
And I did love how short you did the chapters, so it never felt like
Yeah,
that long of a book. You just wanted to keep going and going, you know? I mean,
yeah.
I
There's
read this
none.
in a couple days, and I thought it would take me, I don't know, weeks to read it, but it
Yeah,
wasn't like that, you know?
no. There's very few chapters that are longer than 5 pages. Most
Right.
are one or two or three.
Yeah,
And that was a good way, for one, of keeping the pace up in a long
yeah,
book, and two, it was because I kept breaking. Like I said, when I was writing the difficult stuff,
right.
I would write no more than a couple of paragraphs and then
Yeah,
write something else. So when I read back over everything,
yeah,
I had lots of smaller chapters to knit together, and I found that they worked really well as
right.
standalone.
But there were so many great characters. I mean, Patch's mother and,
Mhm.
um, Missy, and, it was just really amazing. Such an amazing
Thank you.
read. So
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
yeah, it's incredible. Well done. And I can't wait to see the series when it comes out. So,
Thank you so
anyway,
much.
thank you so much for joining us tonight, Chris Whitaker, the author of All the Colors of the Dark. If you haven't read it, please buy a copy and tell your friends, because it is amazing. And just a reminder, stay on the Girlfriend Book Club page, because I'm going to be posting some conversation starters for you guys so you can discuss the book amongst yourselves. And just a reminder that next month, our book is By Any Other Name by Jodi Picoult, and the event is December 17th at 7:30 p.m. So
I
thank you.
read it. Really good.
Oh, you've read it? Okay, great.
I
I haven't
have.
read it. I haven't started it yet.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much. This was
Thank
so
you so
fun.
much, Chris. Have a great evening. Thanks so
And
much.
you. Thanks a lot. Bye.